Wisdom, the final frontier to true knowledge. Welcome to Wisdom Trek, where our mission is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. Hello, my friend. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, your captain on our journey to increase wisdom and create a living legacy. Thank you for joining us today as we explore wisdom on our second millennium podcast. This is day 1281 of our trek, and it is Worldview Wednesday. Creating a biblical worldview is important in order to have a proper perspective on today's current events. To establish a biblical worldview, it is required that we also have a proper understanding of God and His Word. Our focus for the next several months on Worldview Wednesday is mastering the Bible through a series of brief insights. These insights are extracted from the book of the same title from one of today's most prominent Hebrew scholars, Dr. Micheal S. Heiser. This book is a collection of insights designed to help you to understand the Bible better. When we let the Bible be what it is, we can understand it as the original readers did and as the original writers intended. Each week we will explore two additional insights. So today is Mastering the Bible, Genealogies. Insight number 23. Old Testament genealogies were not intended to be a precise indicator of the age of the earth. The genealogies in Genesis chapter 5 are significant for understanding the Old Testament, but not in a way that they are often referenced. Since the 17th century, Bible readers have presumed that the genealogies of the Old Testament were written to provide chronology for the history of the world. That notion was popularized in 1650 with the publication of Bishop James Ussher's Annals of the Old Testament, deduced from the first origins of the world. Ussher's chronology used the genealogies to date the creation of the world to October 23, 4004 BC. There are many problems with Ussher's chronology. It would, for example, put the flood at the time of the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Even if the flood was a regional and not a global event, it would have made the construction of this pyramid unworkable due to the proximity of the Nile and the Nile Delta. Egyptian records prior to and after the Great Pyramid construction say nothing about the Great Flood during this time. However, the real problem with Ussher's work are biblical. Ussher was unaware of certain things that are common knowledge to the biblical scholarship today. For example, manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible do not at all agree when it comes to the genealogical sequence or numbers of years of the pre-flood individuals listed in Genesis chapter 5. The sequence of the generations in Genesis chapter 4 and 5 are also not identical. This has led scholars over the years to propose that the genealogies are selective, which is obvious from the genealogies of Jesus in the New Testament. While gaps are possible, there are other issues that speak to the deliberate construction of the genealogies. Several scholars have proposed that the year numbers in Genesis chapter 5 have a mathematical explanation, in effect, a cipher or code, meant to telegraph information about the individuals in the list. However, none of the proposals have won consensus of acceptance. Another approach has observed that genealogies from contemporary literature follow a pattern evident in Genesis chapter 5. Specifically, several genealogies from the Old Babylonian period arrange names by 10, even when the results do not account for people known from other sources to have lived in the same periods. In Genesis chapter 5, there are 10 generations before the flood and 10 after the flood. The listing may, therefore, be selective. In any event, though the precise reason for the genealogical structure may not be conclusively understood, we must avoid interpreting them outside their ancient context. Forcing them into a service for which they were not intended is not good interpretation. Let's move on to insight number 23, which is, the covenant sign of circumcision was a theological statement for Israelite men and women. The story of Abraham and Sarah is at the core of the story of Israel. God called Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, where it says, "The Lord had said to Abram, 'Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you.'" In Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 through 6, God told him that he would make his offspring like the sand of the seas and the stars of the sky. There was just one problem. Abraham and his wife were very old. Sarah, in fact, was well past childbearing age and did not conceive a child for several years after God's initial promise. Her inability to conceive led to Sarah's proposal that Abraham have children with her handmaid, Hagar. The result was the birth of Ishmael, whom God told Abraham in no uncertain terms that he was not the fulfillment of the original promise. The original promise was that God would enable Sarah to have a child. God, of course, kept his promise. Abraham and Sarah had Isaac. God stepped in and made it clear to both Abraham and Sarah that Ishmael was not the fulfillment of his promise. Sarah was the mother God intended for the promised child. To commemorate this miracle, God gave them both a recurring sign of his covenant of faithfulness, which was circumcision, as told in Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 through 14. The sign of the covenant meant that every male in Abraham's household had to be circumcised. The requirement extended to all males born to every family in the nation of Israel because all Israelites were descendants of Abraham through Isaac. Circumcision seems like an odd sign, not only because of the physical nature of the mark, but also because it seems so one-sided. Of what possible relevance could circumcision have for Israelite women? What's the point in the first place? Because of the sexual nature of the sign of circumcision, the ritual mark was an important theological reminder to both genders. The sign would have taken both the men and women back to the fact that they and their children only existed because of divine intervention. Women would also be reminded of the importance of having husbands who were members of the Israelite community to pass on the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Bearing children to Gentile men in the Old Testament would have been a covenant transgression unless a man joined the people of Israel, which would have required circumcision. As unusual as the sign of circumcision seems to us today, it was a theological statement in its time. This is one important role of ritual, to transport and fix their minds to a transcendent idea. And that will conclude this week's lesson for another 2 insights from Dr. Heiser's book, Mastering the Bible. Next Worldview Wednesday, we will continue with 2 additional insights. I believe that you'll find each Worldview Wednesday an interesting topic to consider as we build our biblical worldview. Tomorrow we will continue with our 3-minute humor nugget that will provide you with a bit of cheer, which will help you to lighten up and live a rich and satisfying life. So I encourage your friends and family to join us and then come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, Creating a Legacy. If you'd like to listen to any of the past 1,280 treks or read the Wisdom Journals, they are all available at wisdom-trek.com. And I encourage you to subscribe to Wisdom Trek on your favorite podcast player so that each day's trek will be downloaded to you automatically. And thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, but most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal each day. And as we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and then leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward, enjoy your journey, and then create a great day every day. See you tomorrow.